We're going to get started in a minute. I want to first of all say hello and have happy afternoon to everybody. I know we're just letting people into the waiting room, from the waiting room in. So I'm glad to hear everybody is doing great. Thank you for joining us for our next community conversation session. It has been too long. If you have followed community conversations since the beginning, this is the longest break that we've had. We haven't had a session since April, I think. April. So welcome back and thank you for joining us in our break. Today, our guest is Stephen Morris, who is the Executive Director of Literacy Volunteers of Greater Hartford. So our conversation is going to be focused around language and how it shapes our world. So the beginning of our conversation is going to focus on the work of literacy volunteers of Greater Hartford. So Stephen will share a little bit about the background, why they do the work that they do, how is it significant, and then when he finishes, we're going to open it up for questions and have a conversation about how language shapes our world, shapes our experiences, shapes our employment opportunities. I'm going to say that now, perhaps, for the audience, that will probably be a big part of our conversation today and Stephen's presentation. So sort of thinking about how language shapes our world and our opportunities and have a rich discussion about that. Okay. If anybody is just new to joining us, please feel free to ask any questions. If you can during Stephen's presentation, if you can share them in the chat, and then I will read them to Stephen at the end in the open session. Okay. Sounds good? All right. So again, please join me in welcoming Stephen Morris from Literacy Volunteers of Greater Hartford. Thank you for being with us here today. And we will just transition our slides to his presentation.
Awesome. There we go. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining this afternoon. And as Dr. Wisniewski said, I'm Steve Morris. I'm with Literacy Volunteers of Greater Hartford, and I'm very fortunate to be presenting and tell you a little bit about who we are and, our region as a whole and how literacy and language affects many facets of our life, things that we may not always think about. I want to start by saying big shout out to Dr. Wisniewski. She's been a big supporter of Literacy Volunteers for some time. I got to know her through her putting on some Ukrainian resource fairs for those Ukrainian refugees who were moving into the Greater Hartford region. Those were excellent resource fairs and very critical for those individuals. And we've actually received some students based off of that. So very fortunate to know Dr. Wisniewski and to be able to present today. And I think it's really interesting that the community conversation topic is global citizenship. Myself, having grown up here in Greater Hartford, I don't think I always viewed Greater Hartford or Connecticut as a very global place. But that really is far, not accurate at all, as we have multiple Fortune 500 companies that are headquartered here or have large offices here, which brings, of course, an international workforce. We have globally recognized higher education institutions that bring international faculty, students, and international programming. And then more locally, we have immigration. And I know a lot of one of the conversations in this conversation series was on immigration and the historic trends of that. And a lot of that still plays out today. I remember when I first got involved with Literacy Volunteers, I met a few students from a tiny country in Africa called Togo, which is in West Africa. And I remember talking to them and they were basically saying, yeah, there's quite a large Togolese community here in Greater Hartford. And I kept thinking to myself, that's pretty interesting because I really did not know anything about that country. And for a small city like Hartford and a region like ours, it was very interesting that people from this tiny country live here. At the same time, you may not know, but Hartford is home to a Brazilian consulate, a Peruvian consulate. New Britain has a Polish consulate. We have a Romanian consulate. These are all different government organizations that have come to this region knowing that there's a large community from those countries that need visa help or different things like that. We may think that happens in New York or Boston, but it's very much a thing that happens in Greater Hartford. So it's a very global region, which I think is which makes it such a beautiful place to live and a place to work as well. So on that topic, on that note, we can keep moving right along to the next slide. So who are we? I'm very fortunate to work for a place called Literacy Volunteers of Greater Hartford. We are based in Hartford, Connecticut. We're on Arbor Street in Hartford, and we also run a small satellite site in East Hartford as well. We've been doing this for 50 years, or actually a little over 50 years. This past year was our 50th anniversary of serving the community. It started as a small service helping people that actually were native English speakers, but were needing some help with reading and writing, and has blossomed into a much larger organization. And today, and we'll get more into that as we go. But so we offer small group instruction. Having that many years of service behind us, we've kind of learned how best to work with a low literate adult. And these approaches are very different than you would say with the K through 12 system. And so I think a lot of times people on this call may take literacy for granted. And I guarantee you probably meet more people that are low literate in your daily lives than you think. And so if you can imagine kind of what it might be like to whether you're a recently arrived immigrant or someone who struggles with English or someone who's a native English speaker, but reading and writing is a challenge. Think about trying to just navigate your daily life. And I'm always very interested when I meet some of our students about, the challenges they face and how they maybe overcome some of these obstacles. So, for example, I've met many students who are native English speakers, and when someone, say, puts a piece of paper in front of them, whether it's at a job or at some sort of office where they're trying to fill out forms, and of course they can't read that form, so they're going to go ahead and say something like, I don't have my glasses today, so I can't do this right now. They don't even wear glasses, but that's their kind of approach to getting over it. So, and with that comes, a lot of confidence issues and, health issues like depression. We meet students who some of them have been through all types of environments, but struggling with literacy adds to making their life much harder. I think sometimes for our students, the hardest decision they make every day is going out their front door, because the world can be quite cruel at times, depending on the way you dress, or maybe you have an accent, or maybe you struggle with English, or reading and writing is a challenge. And so our goal is to work with low literate adults to help them get that confidence. And basically, we want to make them productive members of our community. Of course, if you struggle with literacy, you're less likely to want to get involved in your community. You want to, get involved in your child's schooling. It's going to be harder to do those things if literacy and language are a struggle for you. So, how can we help that? And that's what we try to do. And our students come from all corners of the globe, as it says there. 40 different countries are represented amongst our students, and also students come to us that are born and raised here in the United States. Unfortunately, we see students on occasion that come to us with a high school diploma from the United States public education system, and they're still reading at a very low level. So something might have happened there. So with all those challenges, we have many different programs to meet those needs, and we'll talk a little bit about that as we go. Student reading levels, as it says there, on average are about the fifth grade and below. I would say we see the most of our students at a much lower level than fifth grade, probably like the first grade or second grade level. And just to give you kind of an overview of maybe how we stack up against a traditional adult ed program. So we kind of cater to the lowest literate adults in the community. So to give an example, we may have a student that comes to us from Sudan who was living in a refugee camp. And not only do they not speak English, but they maybe never went to school in Sudan and are not even literate in their own language. So where do you start with someone who's not literate in their own language and try to teach them a new language? And so we have a program. Our program can cater to someone like that, as well as those that are higher level that maybe want to go on to higher education or getting a high school diploma. Like I said, essentially our goal is we're like, I would describe us as a community center that happens to teach literacy skills, as we try to work on a lot of different things with students and really build that confidence. So we can move on to the next slide. So why do we exist? And unfortunately, some of these are rather sobering statistics that you'll see on the screen here. A lot of things that face our country, our society as a whole happen to do with education. A lot of times it can be solved through education. And the key or the foundation of an education is literacy, being able to read and write and interpret the world around you. And so until someone has those skills, it's going to be difficult to take part in that world. So right off the top there, 19% of adults in Greater Hartford, so that's roughly about 200,000 adults, read at or below the second grade level. So when we think of where we want to live in the local economy, we really can't start having a conversation about how to make our region better. We can't start that conversation without addressing that there's a lot of people that can't take part in opportunities. Sometimes we might read in the paper that a new company is moving into the area and they're hiring a bunch of people. which is, of course, great news. But a low literate adult who could easily do a lot of those jobs would struggle just to get access to that opportunity, whether it's through paperwork, whether it's through digital skills. So again, when we think about how we can make our region stronger, we need to address the fact that there's a lot of adults that can help fill some of these gaps that we're talking about, whether it's in the workforce or different areas of our economy. They just might need some help getting over those barriers, and that's where we come in. Another one, household median income in Hartford is just over 36,000, where the state average is close to 80,000. More locally, the town of West Hartford, the median income in West Hartford, for example, is over 100,000. So, it shouldn't really matter where you live in terms of should that impact your opportunities in life. But sadly, in Connecticut, depending on where you live, actually does impact your opportunities in life, your trajectory in life, and what can happen. So it's like I said, it's a sobering fact, and it's something that we need to work on. 15% of Greater Hartford residents are foreign born. And then 43% of Hartford residents do not speak English at home. And so I think we need to think about how do we build systems in place if we're going to be a very welcoming state, which I think we all enjoy of Connecticut being very welcoming and bringing in refugees and lots of immigrants and things like that. We need to make sure that we have structures in place and programs in place that address the needs of them, that allow them to be successful. Sometimes, for example, we see on the news if recently arrived refugees have arrived and they have a roof over their head and stuff, we kind of pat ourselves on the back that, okay, great, they've gotten here. I mean, that's a very critical step, but that's just the first of many steps. Do we make sure that they have opportunities to learn new language skills, career skills, digital skills, get enrolled in health insurance, get their kids in the public school system? There's so many steps to this kind of process of people that are moving through this region. And as I said, I think diversity is what makes this region such a beautiful place, but we need to make sure that the structure is in place for everybody to have a chance at success. And lastly, it's an economic issue as well. Bringing all U.S. adults up to the sixth grade reading level would generate an additional 10% GDP annual income for the country. That's a big, big number. We're talking about billions of dollars. So sometimes I think we may view something of this nature, low literacy or educational gaps, as like that's a you problem. That's that person's problem. They should solve that. But it really isn't our problem. If we can solve this problem, then not only does it help those individuals, but it moves us all up. It makes us a stronger region, more income, annual income for the region, for the country. So it all works out. And I think a lot of times the conversation is around the K through 12. How do we make sure that our kids are ready to move on in life? And I completely get that. But what about the adults? One thing that you'll see in adult literacy, and there's an organization called Pro Literacy, which kind of oversees adult literacy programs in the country. One thing that they'll point out is that low literacy is actually intergenerational. The biggest predictor of a child's future education success in life is actually tied to the literacy level of their mother. And so my point being that, yes, we want to make sure that our K through 12 system is ready to go and produce strong students, but we also need to make sure that adults who maybe got left behind or maybe struggled or maybe never had the chance to go, maybe they've arrived here as an adult, we need to make sure that they also have the opportunity to gain educational skills needed, because it's truly intergenerational that if the parents at home are able to help their child with homework, advocate for their child, speak to their child's teachers, that's only going to set the stage for that student to have a lot more success. A lot of our students, when they come to us, we have a goal sheet that they'll fill out, and a lot of the students want to say, my goal is I want to be able to talk to my doctor. I want to be able to talk to my child's teacher. These are not really, for most of us on this call, these are not things that we think too hard about. But for a lot of our students, these are critical. And as I'm pointing out via the slide, it's also critical to our region. So we can keep going. So what do we do? So how do we kind of address some of those needs? We have multiple programs. As I said, we're kind of like a community center that happens to teach literacy skills. So the programs that we offer are English for speakers of other languages. We call that ESOL. And you may see that abbreviated in other programs called ESL, English for speakers, English as a second language. We call it English for speakers of other languages because a lot of our students, this is not their second language. This would be their third, fourth, fifth language. Understanding that, we call it English for speakers of other language. And I would say that's our biggest program by far. about 80 to 85% of our students are in that program. We also offer basic literacy. That's for native English speakers. Hartford is home to a really large Caribbean population. So we see some of people from that community in that program, as well as people that are born and raised here in the United States that maybe struggle with literacy or struggle with schooling, maybe were formerly incarcerated or for different reasons could not get go to school. And so we have a course designed for that. Also, we see a lot of people that enroll in our programs that have diagnosed or undiagnosed learning disabilities, and we try to help them as well. So we also offer GED and NEDP. That's called the National External Diploma Program, and it's a prep course for those students who are looking to get their high school diploma. We have a course that helps them prepare for that. We also have a citizenship preparation course, so that's for people that want to become United States citizens. We have a course that goes over the whole process from the test to the interview, and making sure that they're prepared to do that. And then career pathways. We'll talk a little about that in the next slide, but that goes over our kind of like our bridge to employment. And then we also offer digital literacy. So many of our students, either maybe they don't have digital resources at home, they may not have internet, they may not have computers. But as we all know, so much of the world is on computer is digital now. Whether you want to apply for a job, whether you want to apply for any type of, maybe government help or any type of a loan, things of that nature, it's going to all be done digitally. And if you don't have those skills, it's going to be tough to do those things. We also offer a book club, or multiple book clubs, I should say. And along with that, we do grammar and writing. And I should mention, and I'll talk about it just at the end, but all of our services, for the most part, are actually taught by volunteers, hence our name, Literacy Volunteers. And the beautiful thing about that is you don't actually have to have any teaching background to join us. We have a training program that is built to give you those skills to work with low literate adults, how to lesson plan, and things of that nature, and get you ready to become a volunteer teacher. And our volunteers teach most of those programs that you see on the screen. And that's a couple pictures of some of our students there. All right, we can keep going to the next slide, please. Okay, so this is kind of the main part of the talk. As Dr. Wisniewski referenced, we're going to talk a little bit about how, literacy and language influence, say, the economy and the workforce. And I kind of touched upon some of the reasons why we would want this to happen, why we want to invest more in a program like a Career Pathways program. So we have, as I referenced, we have a program called Career Pathways. And so for most of our students, a lot of their goals are not just literacy skills, but how can I use those skills to then find livable wage employment? So we built a program called Career Pathways, and it really acts as the bridge for students to take those literacy skills they're gaining in their classes and use that as the bridge to finding, livable wage employment and job advancement, career growth, and more responsibility at their jobs. So we built this program in 2016 because before that we didn't offer any service like this, and our thought was that with elevated literacy skills, the students would just be able to access employment opportunities. And unfortunately, that's just not the case. A lot of our students were coming back and saying, I'm going to different workforce development programs, and they're not really being able to help me because of my literacy level is still not at a very high level. And us having done this work for many years, we really understand how to work with the lower adults. So we said, why don't we try to build our own program? And that's where Career Pathways came about. So we've been doing this since 2016, and our goal is to meet students where they are. This is an elective course. It's a free course, and there's no prerequisites. So if you're in our lowest level class or a highest level class, you can be a part of this. And a program like this is quite critical, especially in today's world, for our local economy. Take the tourism industry, for example. This is a $1 billion industry, even for Connecticut. And it's, as we kind of come out of the pandemic and people are traveling again more, that's an industry that we want to make sure that is very vital to our region. But at the moment, there's over about 2,000 job openings in the hotel and hospitality industry. So, you kind of have to have one. You can't have one without the other. You need the workers to have the tourism industry. So how do we find ways to make that happen? And that's what this program has done is we kind of need to think outside the box. And even with low literacy levels, our students are very capable of not only entering employment, but growing in that employment. So we kind of tailor the program to each student. And you can see in the middle of the screen there in the chart, kind of how we do that with resume building and networking skills. And we help with searching and applying, and digital literacy is a big part of that. And also, you see the different industries on the outside of the circle, and we have connections in almost all of those industries. And we call those our employer partners. These are local employers who know our program, know our students, and want to work with us to help fill their own hiring needs. And they know that the students we send are ready to go. We call them career ready students. They've gone through professional, etiquette and emailing and dress for the office, and they've done mock interviews, and they're ready for a job. And so we work with these employers that when a student is ready, we connect with the employer if they have any openings and try to find a strong fit for the student and the employer. And a lot of times it works really well. I'm thinking of a couple of students. For example, there's a woman named Florabelle who's one of our students, and she was recently hired by a senior housing home as a housekeeper. This is a full-time job with benefits and above minimum wage pay. This is something that this woman's I think she's in her 50s or 60s, and she has not really been able to access anything like this because of her literacy level. And then she joined this program, and we really worked with her on the resume and every step of the process. Because sometimes, as I said, there's little barriers that we may not think about as a problem, but for some of our students, okay, I have an interview and I have to respond to this email, or they want me to upload this document, or I need to sign up for direct deposit. There's so many steps that may be difficult for a student. And that one thing could be the reason they don't get the job. And that's so simple that why would somebody, then it's a problem for the employer. They have to go rehire that position, and it's a problem for the student, but they can't have that job. So if we can kind of help identify what barriers could be in the process that we could work on, not only is that beneficial for the employer, but it's for the student. And we've done a lot of that. So someone like Florabelle, the onboarding, we made sure that we helped her with. We even connected with the HR people to kind of help facilitate the hiring. And of course, she's been a really strong student. Another student we helped get a job, and we got a call from the HR people saying, so-and-so is not actually, there's piece of paperwork he has not done yet. And if he doesn't do it, he's going to end up losing his job. And, they didn't really know that he was struggling with literacy. And I think probably he was a bit shy to bring that up at work. Didn't want to out himself, if you will. And so we said, can we come and work with him? And they let us come on site and help him fill the paperwork out. And this was like 3-4 years ago. And this was only like a couple months into his employment with them. And so they were literally going to let this employee go over this one situation that was easily remedied. And he's been with them for multiple years now. And he's got promotions, he's got more pay, more responsibility. He's one of their better employees. And they continually tell us that. And it's something that's so simple that would have never happened without just a simple intervention. We've had students that go out to get jobs, and we'll actually work with those HR people and say, this person may struggle with the paperwork. So if you can just have someone there to help them, then that student gets the job, and they're there for a long time. And even for those students who don't speak English or don't speak English that well, I'm thinking of another one of our students named Catherine, who's from the Dominican Republic, who was a teacher in the Dominican Republic. Has a college degree from the Dominican Republic and has years of experience teaching. And as we know, the educational industry, even here in Connecticut, there's lots of needs right now. And so she really wanted to use those skills that she has, but of course, literacy was a bit of a barrier. So we were able to help her work with the place that she wanted to work at, and she ended up becoming a paraprofessional and using her skills. She's obviously a native Spanish speaker, and her English skills are coming along, but they needed someone to work in a childcare role with Spanish speaking children. And again, most of the hiring process was in English. And so we were able to help her get to that point. And she's been there for some time now and doing quite well. So it's simple things like that. That's kind of tailoring the process to the student's needs. And these are all positive outcomes for the student and the employer, and helping to fill gaps. I think, again, thinking outside the box is something we may need to do more of, especially in a post-COVID world where we're already thinking outside the box on a lot of things we never thought about before, and hiring being one of them. Another thing I want to point out is certifications. A goal of ours is not just to get a student, get their foot in the door, get their foot in a new industry, but to move up in that industry. So taking what we know about working with low literate adults and turning those into programming has been something that we've really strived to do really well at. And I think we do a nice job of that. So, for example, in the culinary world, if anybody knows, there's such a thing called a ServSafe certification. And there's multiple levels of that. So the entry level is called the ServSafe Food Handler certification. And so what we did was we built a course around that curriculum to help a student that maybe would need a little longer to do it, to learn all the critical information needed, but then to do it in an environment and do it in a class that works for them. And so we've been offering that for a very long time and a lot of success doing that. And then this past spring, we debuted a ServSafe Manager course. And so that's the next level up. So the idea is to help students get their foot in there, and then now they can get a new certification, take on more responsibility, higher pay. And so for that course that we debuted, we had 3 participants. One participant was dyslexic. One had a very untraditional schooling, and the other one was not a native English speaker. People with 3 very different needs in terms of an educational setting. And to give you context, that the way that certification is normally taught is 1 day, 8 hours, and at the end of the 8-hour course, you're taking a 2-hour test. And ideally, you'll get your certification at the end of it. For our students and for those 3 individuals, that just wouldn't have worked. But all 3 of them have been working in the culinary industry for some time. All 3 have their food handler certification, and they just wanted to get that next one up. So we built a month-long, 16-hour course that broke the concepts down into smaller bite-sized thing with vocabulary checks, kind of quizzes, and it was taught by a ServSafe certified proctor. So all the information that one would need to pass the test was covered, but we did it in a way that we knew would work better for them. And even one of the students, Sean, was telling us, by the classes were 2 hours each, and he said by the end of 2 hours, I was pretty much done. Like I needed to just step away and digest what I had learned and do some homework and then come back. So of course, an 8-hour class is not going to work for someone like that. All 3 ended up passing, and right off the bat, one immediately got a raise and a more responsibility as job. And the other one, Cecilia, she's originally from Peru, and she was in that. She's now already looking to become a manager at her job. So and of course, this helps those employers. Now they have a workforce that has new skills and can help even further. And for the student's perspective, now it opens up a new door. And I think that's very critical to the local economy and how we do things. And so that's kind of been our approach, is how do we take things that are very students can definitely do and handle, but maybe they just need a little bit of a different approach to how it's traditionally taught to still get that. And so that's a couple examples. We also recently debuted an internship program called our Ready to Work internship program. A lot of people that are new to this country may not have experience working in this country. They may not have references. So with this program, a student can join us for a term. Our classes are broken down into terms, and they intern in our office, and we have them learn about admin stuff, data entry, customer service. And they stick to a schedule, so it's like a real job. And then by the end of the internship, not only do they have something to put on their resume, but they have a reference, which is us, and it makes them a lot more marketable to new opportunities. One of our first students who did that program was someone from Taiwan originally and had a very strong background, but she just had never worked in this country, and her English was very strong. So she did this program for a little bit, and we were able to kind of, while she was in the internship working, we worked with her on kind of getting more career ready to the United States working world, which was very different than what she was used to in Taiwan. And she was able to get a job in the banking industry. So again, I'm not sure where she would have, of course, got a job somewhere given her skill level and her background. But through this program, we were able to work with her because some of the simple barriers that she was just almost like cultural in terms of what she assumed the process would be like. And we were able to kind of work with her. And then she really wanted to work in the banking industry because that's what her experience was in. And we were able to make that happen. So like I said, sometimes we have to just think a little outside the box. And that's kind of what we've done. And it's very beneficial for both sides of the equation, whether it's the job seeker and the employer as well. And in today's world, I think employers would be very open to finding more qualified candidates that are going to be very serious about a new role. So that's what our Career Pathways program is designed to do. All right, we can move on to the next slide. All right, and then overall, just our impact for this past year. So we run on a fiscal year which just ended July 1st. And so this is what we accomplished this past year. So 636 students were enrolled in all of our programs. That was a 26% increase over the previous year. And on one of those first slides, I pointed out in terms of the actual need of people that are reading at the second grade level or below, that just proves that we're just scratching the surface, really. I mean, that's a lot of students for us. And the need does not seem to be going anywhere. We're getting ready for our new term in the spring, in the fall. And we already have a wait list. because there's that many people that want our services and need our help, which just shows you that there's quite the need in this community. We offered 175 classes this past year, including our new Serve Management course. And then 44 students entered employment or earned a promotion. And, I know sometimes we may not think that out of 636, only 44 got a job. But as I said, our program is catered to meet the student where they are. Some students, they may not be ready for a job for months, possibly even a year or longer. And that's okay. Our programs, there's not really a deadline. You can be in our program for as long as you want. And sometimes students will join our program, get what they want out of it, and then we'll see them a couple years later. I think Cecilia, the woman who I referenced in our Serve Safe Manager class, is a great example of that. She joined us in 2018, took some of our classes, got her Serve Safe food handler certification through our course, and then spent a few years working in the culinary world, and then came back to us and then joined our Serve Safe Management course. So I think that's what's really fun about our programming, is that there's not like, okay, you've graduated. And of course, some people move on and they don't need us anymore, and that's the point. But we always let the students know that we're here for as long as you need us. If you want to come back later on, and sometimes students will, as the final number of their citizenship, sometimes students will come to us as a literacy student. Maybe we won't see them for a few years after they've moved on to something else, and they'll come back and say, "No, I'm ready for my citizenship. Maybe you can help me." And of course we can. So we currently have 14 students enrolled in our citizenship process, or citizenship class, which is, for anybody that knows about the citizenship process, it does take a while, and that can be a long process as well. So we've been able to accomplish a lot. And we're continuing to try to find new ways to meet the need that is the community that we serve. And as I said, we're kind of just scratching the surface on the need that is out there. And we hope to have another really successful year. Let me go to the next slide. And now we have a quick story, impact story. So this is Veronica. She's one of our former students. I talked about how some students kind of graduate from us, which of course we want to happen. And she's very much like that. I don't want to tell her story for her because we're going to get to see a brief video of her, but you can go ahead and play that video now.
But it's an honor for me to share my story about LVGH. This organization helped me tremendously when my family and I arrived in the United States from Ukraine back in 2014, barely speaking any English. We arrived in the middle of the spring and desperately needed to start learning English to find a job. At that time, all the schools and ESL courses were finalizing their spring semester and had a summer break until September. We couldn't let ourselves lose a few months without any English courses. That's when we discovered LVGH that was offering summer classes. That was exactly what we needed to begin our American dream. My mom and I joined the ESL summer classes, which helped us eventually get into college. LVGH taught us not only English, but also American history, American culture, traditions, and most importantly, it helped us find friends. Somebody had told me back in 2014 that I would speak English freely, would be an American citizen, and would work for the biggest healthcare company in the country. I would have never believed that. At that time, my future was uncertain, but LVGH opened up so many doors for me and assisted me during my citizenship process, and I will always be grateful for that. LVGH is always here and happy to help. All of them, the tutors, the volunteers, the staff are doing an amazing job helping the immigrants find their way in this country. And every success starts with learning the language. I would like to say a big thank you to literacy volunteers of Greater Hartford that helps immigrants to make their dreams come true. Thank you so much. Your work is priceless.
There you have it. That's Veronica's story. And I think one thing that she pointed out as well is that it's a process. I mean, she joined us in 2013 and she was able to get a job working for a major insurance company. And that was only a few years ago. So it takes time. And sometimes that can be discouraging for immigrants when they first get here, is that things do take a long time. But that's why we're always here. We're here for as long as they need us. And someone like her is another good example. I mean, she now owns a home. She has a really strong job, full health insurance. So, I mean, these are the outcomes that we want for all of us, and especially for those that maybe often overlooked. And so simple things as getting someone a job that has health benefits can change a lot for that person, and also change for us as an economy. Obviously, there's a lot of people that are uninsured. I think in Hartford alone, I think about 15% of the residents are uninsured. So, these things are a problem for not just that person, but for the healthcare system, for everybody. So something as simple as helping someone get a job that has benefits can be very important. And then who knows where they can go from there, especially if they can grow in that job, which is the point of what we're trying to do with a lot of our services, is help them grow educationally, professionally. And then that opens up so many doors, whether it's buying a home or so many things that can really change and really benefit our community. So, and I think Veronica's story is a wonderful example of that. All right. And then the final slide that we have before we open up the Q&A portion, is how you can connect with us. Of course, as I said, we rely heavily on volunteers to do some of our services, and we're always looking for new volunteers. So if anybody is interested, feel free to visit our website, lvgh.org. Our next tutor training will be in the fall to get our next group of tutors ready to go and work with our students. The classes are in person. We also offer them in Hartford and East Hartford, depending on which is easier for you. East Hartford's quite small, so there's a lesser opportunities there. But Hartford, we offer classes in the morning and at night. So if you say work in the morning, you can always volunteer at night, and vice versa. And then also on the top there, you see that's our phone number. So if anything I said resonated with you from a partnership perspective, a hiring perspective, by all means, please reach out. I'll be happy to have the conversation with you or my colleagues as well. So I just want to say thanks again to Dr. Wisniewski for inviting literacy volunteers, getting to share a little bit about what we do, and just how really interesting and really great Greater Hartford is, and how diverse it is, and how that impacts us all. So thanks again so much for listening, and I'll be happy to take some questions at this time.
Thank you again for sharing, Stephen. And I have paragraphs of questions that I just received, which is great. So I'm going to, give a minute or two in case anyone wants to drop a question in the chat, but sort of to pick up on a couple of points that you said. While we use the organization as a frame of our conversation, you provided so many excellent points about how literacy is connected to our economy, right? To how well we go to our education system. I'll sort of ask the question broadly, and if anybody wants to raise a hand or anything, it's like, did any of us think about the connection or the relationship between literacy and our economy? I knew that, but until you said it that way, I didn't think of it in those terms, right? So thinking about how literacy is connected to how well our economy does or doesn't do, right? And one thing that resonated with me, and I know this from being from an immigrant background, how language is tied to employment. That is a relationship that goes together. And as I think you pointed out, a livable wage, because I know many people who work in various industries because they don't speak the language, but doesn't mean they're making a livable wage.
Right. Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, a lot of our students can easily find jobs, and a lot of them come to us with jobs, but I would call them underemployed. They have a job, but maybe they want another job because the first one's not paying enough. And if we can alleviate that by one job with benefits, as I mentioned, livable wage employment, not only are you helping that person, but you're helping us all. It's just one, it's a person that doesn't need any maybe government services or things of that nature. They can be very independent, and that's really what our students are looking for, is independence. As I said at the beginning of the presentation, a lot of our students are coming to us because they need help with a lot of things, not just literacy, but it's like computer help or things like that. Sometimes students will literally bring their mail and say, can you look at this letter I got? Because I don't know what it says. And it happens to be like from the government or something like that. So imagine trying to go through your life by looking in the mailbox every day and saying, I have no idea what this says. So how can we make their lives a little easier and give them that confidence?
So I'll get to some of the questions that I already received in the chat, right? So the first question is, in addition to volunteering, what else can employers, educators, and all of us do to promote literacy and accessibility and inclusivity for literacy learners?
Yeah, I think if anything, the biggest thing is just maybe taking a broader view of it. You may think, why is this person not getting this thing? Or why are they not doing that? Or, it's taking a long time to respond to this. What might, you immediately think why that is. But if we kind of step back and kind of just embrace it, like I said, a lot of our students are almost embarrassed to share that they may struggle with literacy. And like us all, we probably have all struggled with something in our lives, but it's okay to say, I need some help with this. And it's okay as an employer, as an educator, kind of like I said, thinking outside the box and making the processes accommodating to everybody. The employers that we've worked with that have been the best for us and most successful in terms of placement of our students are those that are willing to let us come on site, or they would come here and do interviews, things of that nature. We use a lot of Google Translate for our students, how we connect with them and try to communicate with them. And that's okay. I think sometimes it's like we immediately think if they don't speak English at a certain level, then, they're not ready for this thing. But a lot of times they very much are. It's just, you got to think a little outside the box.
And I've heard that, many times of, well, they're not proficient in English, they can't do the job. And that's one barrier right there, right? Because we're thinking right away that, they're not able to perform. And just one quick thing to pick up that you also said, and I know I use this myself. My Polish is not as strong as my English, and I'm learning Polish vocabulary. So I use Google Translate quite often, right? Just to make sure I get like a research vocabulary back into my toolbox. So Google Translate is a good tool. I will say it is literal, so you might not do the meeting part. So just be careful there if you use it. But at least you can communicate. Are there other tools like that that could be helpful in our everyday? That what should we have, especially as educators, as our toolbox?
Yeah, I think not just from Google Translate's a great digital tool and a way to actually communicate, but I think also I wouldn't say, being willing to adapt processes or even curriculums, as we've proved that can work. I understand there's always rules about how things work, but another example I come across is a lot of people want our students to work in the manufacturing world, and a lot of them can. But a lot of times the barrier, the minimum to join a program like that is a high school diploma. Not some of our students, they don't want a high school diploma right now. They might be 30, 40, 50. They already have a high school diploma from their native country, but it's not recognized here. So how could we think about something? Is there a way that they could prove that they have the skills and assessment of some sorts that they could then do that job without this one piece of paper being the barrier between that? So I think from a day-to-day perspective, yes, there's plenty of tools like Google Translate and things to actually communicate with the student or the person you're talking with. But is there ways that go beyond just being able to make sure that their point is understood, but make sure they have access to other opportunities as well?
Thank you. We have another question, which is following up on the idea that students often request help with computers. How has technology impacted your approach to adult literacy services or changed the way in which you teach?
That's a great question. And it really, digital literacy has always been a part of the student experience at LVGH. But I would say, like a lot of us, what we're doing right now on Zoom, in a COVID world, we had to literally move all of our programs to digital platforms. And that was quite the challenge, because not only were we dealing with individuals who struggle to communicate in English, but a lot of them don't have computers at home or don't have resources at home. And so digital literacy became a very critical aspect of all of our programming. Now, if you come to our location in Hartford, we have TVs in all the rooms. We have laptops to be passed out. We're going to be investing in some tablets and things of that nature, because we kind of look at literacy in a very whole sense, whether it's reading and writing, digital literacy, financial literacy, career literacy, health literacy. And digital literacy is such a critical part to that. As I mentioned earlier, our whole lives are on the computer now. You can't walk into a store or a place of business and say, can I have an application to work here? They're going to say, yeah, go to our website. So if you don't have the ability to do that, well, then you're not going to get the job. And a lot of our students don't even know how to use an email or struggle with something as simple as email, and they want to communicate with maybe family in different parts of the globe. So just as much as literacy can open up a lot of doors, so can digital literacy.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So we have another question. So we have issues on Long Island with what we call language access. This is about government, particularly law enforcement, becoming more accessible to individuals or immigrants who are non-English speakers and non-readers. Is there anyone in the greater Hartford area working on this, which I'm sure is also difficult? Our focus down here is on traffic stops, which we know leads to problems. So sounds like a connection between law enforcement and non-native English speakers.
Yeah, I don't know of any efforts of that nature happening in Hartford, but that would very much make a lot of sense. As I said, or one of the slides referenced, I think 43% of Hartford residents don't speak English at home. And to the person who asked that question, that's a very relevant topic, because like a lot of our students, they might be in a situation where they don't know what's being asked of them, or they're not sure how to respond to something. And that's, that gets back to my point about we need to find ways to be accommodating. If we're going to welcome people to live in our communities, we need to make sure they can have full access to our communities and succeed. So unfortunately, I don't know of anybody doing that work in this area, but it is a very, it's something that should be explored.
Absolutely. Going back into the questions.
Sure.
You're very popular. All right. So how do you see the relationship between digital literacy and reading evolving? And what new opportunities and challenges does this convergence present for readers in the 21st century?
Yeah, I think they go hand in hand. I mean, I as I said, we're actually hopefully this fall, we're building out a more formalized digital literacy program because our students want that. We obviously have textbooks and things of that nature for our literacy programs, but now we've invested in software that allows literacy learning through digital tools, not just like a textbook or using a whiteboard where it's traditional class environment. But we're trying to find more and more digital tools for our students, because we'd be doing a disservice to them if we're not preparing them for the digital world as much as we are for for literacy. So that's something that we are continuing to invest further in. And to that question, yeah, they're hand in hand. I think if someone doesn't have digital skills, but they have literacy skills, they're still not prepared for the world around them. So we need to do a better job of making sure that both of those needs are fully addressed.
And, I think something to pick up on before we end our conversation, right, is also, you had mentioned this in your career pathways part, is thinking about social norms, right? I'm a sociologist, so of course I'm going to gravitate to that, but thinking about American norms and customs, right? The way in which you apply for a job, an interview, and that whole process is quite unique to the United States, right? We have each culture has different expectations, right? As to what that is, I think that's also something to keep in mind in our conversation as well, about sort of that social and cultural capital of helping to navigate different elements of American life, especially when it comes to literacy, but also literacy of social norms, right?
That's critical. I mean, we see a lot of students in other countries. It's very common where people actually have a picture of themselves on their resume, or they have their marital status, or they have like their age right on the resume. And that's completely normal. And I've seen students bring resumes to us that look like that, and they're thinking they're going to go pass it out. And we say, absolutely not. You do not need to have a picture of yourself. You do not need to say if you're married or not. And it's something as simple as that. Like if you brought that to an employer, what are they going to do? In our culture, they're going to be like, we can't accept this. We don't need to know this information about you. And so it's making sure that they're ready to not only apply for jobs in this country, but also be, successful in those jobs. And also I'll mention something, I know we have questions, so I'll keep it brief, but like the onboarding as well. A lot of companies make it's like a routine onboarding, whether you're an entry-level employee or whether you want to be the CEO, it's like the same onboarding process. And that gets back to my point about, can we tailor processes to certain groups of people? And so like we've helped students get jobs at a local hospital here in Hartford, and their job maybe is more like working in the cafeteria or doing something of that nature. Yet there's like an 8-hour onboarding process that includes like how to talk to nurses and what happens if this happens, but like the very medical stuff. And I get it, it's a medical environment, but their job is not interacting with that side of the hospital. And I'm not sure when it ever would. But then it's like, if they don't do this training and pass these little quizzes, they can't then start the job. And so someone who's a low literate adult already is going to be struggling with that. And the job that they're hired for has nothing to do with those topics. And so again, our staff has at times worked with them to get them through these little quizzes just so they can start on day one, and sometimes we've even talked to some of these medical groups and said, like, is there any way to tailor this a little bit? And I haven't really heard a lot of feedback that that's possible, but it just seems like they're missing out on a big opportunity of people that could fill a lot of their jobs. The processes is kind of crazy.
You had said something to me. Steve and I have had many coffee conversations and
Right.
over the last year, and I remember you saying something to me, and somebody says something that but they put it in a different way, and it was just about how if we support individuals and what a boost that would be to the economy, right, into our workforce. So sort of just thinking about the ways in which that if we focus on literacy, right, if we focus on these skills, what can that really do to our local community, right? We are focused on Greater Hartford in this conversation. But what does that mean to our local community? What does that mean to our state economy? What does it mean to our national economy, right? We do have employment opportunities that are open, and how can we minimize barriers in order to gain access and entry points, right? Many times you and I have had a conversation about how you and your organization have minimized barriers of the application. Mm-hmm. Or like you said, this trainings, or I mean, there's been multiple trainings. I'm a native English speaker, and it's sometimes really hard for me to get through these trainings, right?
Yeah.
Let alone, somebody who's not. How do we minimize barriers? How can we as educators support our students and prepare them for this in order to support them successfully in the future?
Yeah, well, I think, a lot of what you said about what we've done is it's not rocket science. It's really just taking the process, breaking it down. And I think for some reason, traditions stick for hiring processes. And that's why when I hear this narrative, sometimes like, oh, no one wants to work right now. That's not true. A lot of people want to work, and there's a lot of people that could fill a lot of gaps, as I referenced. They just need a little extra help. So I think, there's a couple of ways to approach what you're asking. I think first and foremost is continuing to prepare students for what is the traditional world. I mean, we know that our students are still going to have to go to interviews. So we do mock interviewing. There's things that are going to happen the traditional way in the process. But I think also advocating, a lot of what we do is advocating for the student with our employers. We're saying, this person is going to be a good employee. And we can help them get ready for this opportunity, but you got to work with us a little bit here. And a lot of the success stories that I referenced were very much that was the employer working with us to help that student get that job, and they're still there. And that's what we do as well. We kind of do like follow up. We do a lot of like even after the student has a job, we usually work with them for 6 months, if not longer, to make sure that they're doing okay with the job, and they're enrolled in the health insurance if they have it, making sure that direct deposit's all ready to go. So it's really making sure that every step of the way there's someone to help them.
Having those systems in place and that follow through is key, as you were mentioning. We have one more question, and it's around what are the principal sources of funding for your organization?
Sure. So we're a nonprofit, and so we receive funding from many different streams. I would break it down. I would say about a third of our funding is individual donors, people that are very generous and know our programs and want to see our programs continue, and they donate. We also, a third of it comes from state funding, I would say. So we do get some money from the Connecticut Department of Education to do our programming, and then the final third is private grants, foundations, things of that nature.
Or you have a fundraiser coming up, which I'm going to be at. I'm going to come.
Yes, if you don't mind, April 28th, Literacy and Libation.
August 28th.
August, geez, Lisa's already saved me.
But we're saying this in a funny way. We were just discussing this before at the beginning of our thing. So that was they will have an event as well on August 28th.
August 28th, our development director's on the call, so I got to get this right. August 28th, downtown Hartford, Salute. It's our Literacy and Libations fundraiser. We'd love to see you all there if you'd like to join us.
I will be there. So if you ever want to hang out, I'll be there too.
Perfect.
Any other questions as we wrap up? So I don't see any hands. So
there's one more question in the chat. Did we answer Ken's question
about principal sources?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, great.
Thank you, Paula. So really quickly, as we wrap up, I want to say thank you again to Stephen for joining us today. Thank you for sharing. I will say Stephen has been a wonderful partner and someone that's great to talk to. So if you have any interest, I would highly recommend following up with his organization and Stephen. And thank you for sharing. I think you gave us a great picture of what literacy looks like. How does this impact the economy? How does it impact us in the education, but also sort of throughout the state as well? As we wrap up, I just wanted to also say thank you all for joining us for Community Conversations. This is our last one of the summer. I know it's first and last. We are sort of getting back on track of our programming, and there will be updates soon. So if you can, please just check Goodwin University social media outlets for updates, but we hope to have a fall program relatively soon. However, if you've missed previous ones, Stephen is number 15 of our lecture. This was a lecture series that was only supposed to be 4 lectures. Stephen is number 15. So if you missed a session or want to rewatch a session, I'm going to share the link. Everything is recorded and on Goodwin University's YouTube page. Oh, thank you, Carrie, for sending it. We have lectures on various topics, all related and connected from experts in their fields. So there's our full list, and Stephen's will be made available soon once we go through the editing process. So thank you again. If you have any questions, I'll stay back for a few more minutes. And it was lovely for you to join us today. And thank you again, and have a great summer.